All right. Hi, how are you?
Hi. I'm doing well. I'm happy that we're on a break.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself first. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what your work is.
Yeah, so my name is Maria Moreno. I'm, as you mentioned, organizer, meaning that I'm a person that connects restaurant workers. Well, my focus is on restaurant workers. I'm a person that connects restaurant workers with different resources. I was also for 10 years until the pandemic, a restaurant worker myself. Um, my focus is really on advocacy for restaurant workers. I make workers aware of their power within their workplaces and help them navigate difficult issues within them.
Awesome. So I think we can get right into it. Overall, how have workers been impacted by the virus? And I want to know what people have been telling you.
Yeah, so unfortunately, workers in the restaurant industry have been some of the worst affected workers in all industries because we've kind of been hustled back and forth between having our workplaces closed for an indefinite period of time.
Mhm.
I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, it was 2 weeks, 4 weeks. We have no idea when we're going to come back.
Right.
Many of the workers in the industry didn't have access to benefits
Mhm.
because whether they're undocumented or they work for they're gig workers, or because they're not declaring fully their tips, or whatever the reason may be. So that was also another kind of hurdle. Not just were you unemployed, but you were also not accessing benefits
Yeah.
as quickly as you needed them. So many of us lost our jobs for good because the restaurants closed. And that was at the beginning of the pandemic.
Mhm.
When they got called back, I feel many of them were scared to come back, obviously, because the pandemic is still happening, and many of them have families that they have to, kind of be looking out for, and need to think, is it worth for me to come into work and risk the safety of my family?
Mhm.
Many of
Mhm.
them were just not being given enough hours to come back into their jobs. So even the ones that, chose like, hey, yeah, I'm going to take my job back. Let's say they used to work 28 hours and now they work 14 hours, and it's not enough to make ends meet. They're not making as many tips if they were in tip positions. Some of them got rehired in different restaurants because their restaurants closed. So they're not at let's say they had seniority and they had a rate that was more of a sustainable wage for them. They weren't able to access that rate immediately or at all.
Mhm.
So it's been really tough. And more recently with this reclosing of the restaurants, we've
Right.
seen a really mixed bag. We've seen workers that are so relieved because they're so scared to be coming into work. I had two workers specifically from a restaurant in San Francisco who were just felt really guilty. They called me and it's like, I feel actual relief because I've been working 12-hour days. I don't have time to take care of myself at all. But I feel like I'm so ungrateful if I don't take this job right now, if I don't, you know, take like take part in an opportunity that many others in our industry don't have.
Right.
And then some other ones, even though they're not accessing benefits, they were just I'm sorry, the other worker, he was not, even though he's not accessing benefits, he was going back home to his daughter. So
Mhm.
he was
Right.
really scared of bringing the virus back to his daughter. And these are places of work that I know for a fact were, taking care of their workers and had a COVID protocol. We've also had another group of workers that, have been showing up to work nonetheless, but at their workplace, there are no defined COVID protocols. So there have been
Mhm.
COVID cases and they have been essentially exposed. Some of them have not been told that they were exposed. They were actually, heard from another coworker, oh, this person is actually not at work because they tested positive for COVID. So, you know,
Yeah.
there's been it's been a scary time for workers in the restaurant industry, and so very uncertain.
Totally. Yeah, thank you so much for giving such a good overview of what's happening right now. I realized I wanted to really zoom out a little bit and talk about what types of jobs are low wage in the restaurant industry and why is that?
So definitely what we call back of the house jobs are the lowest paid jobs in the industry. And we can start with dishwasher and kind of make our ways to different jobs in the kitchen. And back of the house is what we call, the people who work in the kitchen. So think, line cooks, meaning like the people who are cooking the food, but are not necessarily a chef, prep cooks and the people who are preparing your vegetables, cutting them up, and doing kind of like the pre-work to opening the restaurant and sometimes during the restaurant. And what we've noticed about the reasoning why these are lower paying jobs is because people who might be undocumented or people who do not have as much experience in the restaurant industry are able to access them. However, they are some of the hardest jobs. The people in these jobs, I mean, like being myself in the industry, are some of the people that work the longest hours and the most what I feel like can be, I mean, I feel like all jobs can definitely be stressful in the restaurant industry, and all of them put on a lot of effort, but they have, I feel like, the longest hours and often like the most pressure because it's like, they receive everything like kind of like behind scenes, and they have like this pressure, and like there's like heat in the kitchen, and there's just they're the backbone of the restaurant. So when you see really busy outside, in there they're just like hustling to an extent that I myself find amazing, but I definitely don't feel like it's compensated, and I think it has to do with the level of experience in some cases, but in a lot of cases because undocumented folks or folks who are maybe like disenfranchised and of marginalized communities enter these jobs.
Yeah, definitely. And it is, I'm also impressed and taken aback by those jobs too. And also, just being on your feet for so many hours at a time too. It's like super hard work, which obviously isn't compensated proportionally. So I wanted to return to basically the safety component of this. You did touch upon it before, but obviously there are different concerns with indoor and outdoor dining. In my eyes, they're pretty different. In terms of potential safety situations. I would love to hear from you about what workers have been telling you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I think you're going to get a mixed bag for absolutely everything. So when it was only outdoor that was open, many people, I mean, there was, the restaurants that I feel like were doing it right, who had a really strong COVID protocol, and people felt like, their co-workers' shifts were staggered, so there weren't a tons of people, less than 6 feet apart within the kitchen and within the front of the house, which was only, doing to-go orders. But even with outdoor, depending on the space and kind of like the culture of the workplace, there were definitely issues like the case that I was referencing with no, it wasn't a single case, but I was thinking of one case in particular with not having a COVID protocol and people not being told about a COVID case from a coworker. That was a space that was only open outdoors. So what we've seen is and I don't think it's just the fault of the employers, but what we've seen is that whether you're working indoors or outdoors, you have to establish a really strong COVID protocol. You have to teach your workers in the language that they understand these COVID protocols. And you have to have someone on shift that's kind of following along to these protocols. And sometimes because the workload has changed so much, and sometimes it has just increased so much, even the managers cannot keep up. The workers on the floor cannot keep up. So I feel like there needs to be somebody designated to just work on, let's make sure that we have enough sanitizer. Let's make sure that people are following the COVID protocol. Let's reteach whoever we need to reteach. Definitely with indoor dining, it's just been a lot more risky. I think workers there's been a different component to the health and safety aspect, which is the stress of just being
Right.
there. There's also people sometimes are working longer hours for the places that do have a good COVID protocol. So I mean, it's great
Right.
that there's a sensitivity to it from the employers who have it, but it's definitely taxing, and it can be like, you only have life within work for at least those days that you're working.
Totally.
Which, I think some workers are grateful, but some workers are also like, I have my family at home. So like, I don't have time to, and now I have my kids at home. So like, I don't have time to take care of them when I need to take care of them. Right.
Yeah.
So, but there's definitely, I think, when it comes to health and safety, I think both have had their risks, but there's definitely I hear more instances of COVID cases coming up in spaces with indoor dining, and more of like stress and fear. And I like the feels from the workers that, this COVID protocol doesn't feel, specific enough to what we're doing,
Right.
We were just asked to use more sanitizer or like do it a couple more times, but like, what about, making sure that we're all wearing our mask when we're in this space? What about not scheduling the full staff to be indoors? What about the customers? That has been a really big one. We've had workers just be like, I'm scared because I work in fine dining, and I can only tell the customers so many times, please keep your mask on when I come to your table.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also doubly difficult where you were mentioning, creating safety protocols and making sure everything is, extra clean. That obviously is more work, but it's coming at a time where people are just being laid off left and right because places are trying to stay afloat. So it's this issue where maybe there's even more work and fewer workers, and that gets spread out to everyone. I talked to a woman who worked at a restaurant in the Bay Area for a story, and she said that everyone basically who was working front of the house before, so like servers and hosts, they all had to take cleaning shifts, and that was something she was not used to doing and something she didn't really feel prepared to do, and it was tough for her. So we have just 2 minutes more here before we get on the next guest, but I would love to hear from you if you have any final thoughts about things you think people should know about how the virus is impacting restaurant workers, particularly low wage and undocumented workers.
Absolutely. I just want to throw out statistics out there, and it's that like 60% of our restaurants are probably not coming back. I mean, there's been so many closures already. I don't know the exact percentages of how many restaurants have closed, because I think they're happening every single day, and those percentages are changing every single day. But another thing that I want to highlight is that the help for restaurant workers has been so minimal, and I mean that from the owner to the dishwasher. I've found that, we co-run a fund with some other organizations, a fund that, offers $500 to undocumented workers. And I have spoken to undocumented workers on the phone who have been unemployed still. How many months are we into the pandemic? 9 months into the pandemic. Yeah. So the help has been minimal. I feel a lot for employers. I speak to what we call high road employers, what we call the employers that take the high road to profitability, meaning that they do the best that they can for the employees. And, they just fear if they're going to make it through the winter, because they've already invested so much money into like their COVID protocols, are already invested as much money as they can to give their workers. So they're very concerned about, like, how long is this going to last? And also like, is help ever going to come? Is there going to be a bailout for restaurants? Because restaurants are such an essential part of our culture and a community. And we just feel like there just hasn't really been enough help. So just keep that in mind when you go to a restaurant, if you're able to offer a tip, if you're ever to be extra kind to the people who are taking care of us right now, because I do feel that the people in the restaurant industry are frontline workers. That they're helping feed our society, and they have just been forgotten. And we, as an industry, I feel like we're at the brink of a collapse, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was great speaking with you. Such great info. Appreciate it as always, Maria. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. All right. We will be waiting for our next guest now, who should log on momentarily. Maria mentioned there the restaurant bailout, and I know Maya, who is connecting now, she has some thoughts on this. As far as disclosure, also, she is my friend, and I'm really excited to talk to her. She's worked in restaurants for a long time, and a variety of roles. She's currently a chef at the Rose in Venice, and also has another job, which she'll talk about. Hi, Maya. Would love if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi. I just want to make sure you can see me and everything.
I can. You look great.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I currently am working as a line cook at the Rose Cafe in Venice, a pretty large establishment here in Los Angeles that has 275 outdoor seats. Obviously, recently shut down. Wednesday was our last service, which we can talk about later. And then I'm also the director of ops and sales for this app. Well, it's actually going to be a suite of apps. It's called Check Please. And the idea is to help restaurant owners and operators streamline, make their operation a lot more efficient through repairs and maintenance specifically. That's what we're focused on at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I have a background in all sorts of sort of front of house, back of house, back office management and operations. And that all brings me to where I am today. Before COVID, actually, I was working at the Nomad Hotel as one of the F&B managers and, working on the in-room dining team and coffee and tea program. So lots of different experience. A lot of people usually sort of have one or the other. And so I've sort of been able to, find a way to get both. But I would say that most people, it's definitely sort of what Maria was speaking about in working back of house and being a line cook. It's, the not so glamorous part of the industry in a lot of ways. So it's been crazy to sort of get back into that. I got into hospitality because I love cooking and I love the industry, but it sort of gets to the heart of the issue where, growing up, especially as a female and especially going into an industry that's very manual labor oriented, and grossly underpaid for the type of work and the kind of work that you're doing. Everyone would always tell me to get out while you can. Why are you going into this industry with a Yale education and what are you doing there? So it's been crazy, to say the least, a total whirlwind. But I mean, the most recent closures are definitely going to, obviously impact the ability for many restaurants to open. I think this is really going to be a make or break situation depending on how the government steps in.
Totally. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about first, sort of this idea that there hasn't been a bailout. It doesn't look like there will be one soon. What are your thoughts on this? Have you done any work about that? I wasn't sure if you had been involved in anything with that.
Yeah, so I joined the sort of Independent Restaurant Coalition right at the beginning of COVID, sort of when everyone was just at a loss and had no idea what to do. And I think that a couple of, really magical things have happened through COVID where, it is such a competitive industry. And even when you are making it, you're making it on a 10% margin, which can so easily be taken away in a week or a month. Right. And so many of these amazing restaurateurs, I hopped on the phone at the beginning and this woman, Anne from Pajot Lease, basically started this phone call and led this phone call of so many, there was such an outpouring of people who wanted to join this call, tons of different restaurant groups in Los Angeles, Suzanne Goen, Caroline Stein, your local bartender at a restaurant that you go to all the time. Everyone was on this phone call. And restaurant owners were being incredibly candid about, I just don't know what to do. How are you guys surviving? And how are you going to? And we're going to have to close. And what kinds of things are you doing to help your employees? And, lawyers were hopping on to offer free advice because I think that people just, unfortunately, there are so many weaknesses of the industry that have become so prevalent, like have been made so people are finally aware of them now,
Totally.
because of what's going on. And obviously I would rather them not be happening in the first place, but I think that it's really good that this awareness is spreading about, how underpaid people are and healthcare, and how it's not necessarily a given that you would get that as an hourly worker at a restaurant. And especially in the current state of the world, having a restaurant close down, and then not only are you furloughing your employees, but paying for healthcare is really expensive. And so many restaurant owners want to be able to do that, but because of the situation, they cannot.
Yep.
And it's choosing between sort of, well, I do want to be able to employ people when this is over, and I want to keep the business afloat. But I also want to pay for their healthcare right now, and it's compromised constantly.
Yeah.
Especially given this huge investment a lot of people have made in the outdoor dining.
Right.
With all the heaters and all of that going into winter, now basically being told, well, that investment was sort of for nothing because now you're going to be shut again.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that and the viability of outdoor dining right now, while things are being forced to close down, for everyone's safety because there's a pandemic. What do you think about that? And your restaurant recently closed outdoor dining indefinitely. Is that right?
Well, so the mandate is for 3 weeks. It's actually, it's mandate. Governor Newsom basically made this a thing. And so the issue is not, restaurant owners want to comply and do whatever is safest for the population, and they don't want to be the epicenter of a spread. For instance, the Rose does biweekly free testing for all employees, regardless of whether you're full-time or have health insurance. One example of sort of an amazing, Jason Neroni is an amazing restaurateur and definitely prioritizes his staff more than I think most people are able to, because he has a successful restaurant. And has been able to remain successful. But, going into, for instance, the Nomad, like they didn't offer healthcare. They furloughed all their employees. There was no, testing right at the beginning of when all this was happening. And so I think it really just varies, and every restaurant operation is different. There isn't like a standard, a standard thing. It just makes it, anyways, all restaurants want to comply and do the right thing, but I just think that when you've just told restaurants, hey, it's safe to do outdoor dining, invest all of your money in, heaters and patio seating and all of this stuff, and restaurants are like, great, we can do that. We want the business to succeed. And then now being forced to close, it's not just the 3 weeks of revenue you're not making, but it's all the food in the walk-in that's going to go bad. It's the that you've spent labor, making sauces and things like that you're going to use in a couple weeks, and now you can't. And then it's going to be repurchasing and redoing all of that in 3 weeks from now. And so it creates, it's not that the restaurant owners don't want to comply. It's just the issue is they're being forced to take on a burden of an incredible financial burden and really not given any help.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like no one really wins there. So, okay. That was really great hearing about outdoor dining. I wanted to touch upon delivery services and what you think about them. Are they viable? I know a lot of them charge take a pretty big chunk from the restaurants themselves. So what do you think about all that? And does your restaurant use DoorDash, Grubhub, any of those?
Yeah. So essentially, I've used delivery services from a number of different perspectives. As an operator who's basically gotten restaurants set up on them and tried to drive revenue through them, as someone who frequently orders takeout and delivery and, loves eating in the comfort of my own home, and through the restaurant and actually making the orders that go out to guests. And yes, the Rose does use, I think, pretty much all of the delivery services. The first 6 months of COVID, when the first shutdown happened and they were operating strictly on takeout, they were bleeding money. It was not profitable. And when you think about any successful restaurant, a really successful restaurant, probably, the highest margins they're going to be making is 20%. And so when you think about the delivery fees, which can range from, I would say 15% to 30%, if you are paying 30% fees, you are losing money on every single delivery order. And so why do restaurants do it then, right? Because while you're open, it's another way to drive revenue, break even. The hope is that you break even, that you probably offer higher margin items on there, not your most expensive items. But also as a brand like the Rose, for instance, they have such a loyal customer base. They're in the business to serve people and give people the food that they want. And people come for cacio e pepe, people come for the Brussels sprouts, and they want to be able to have that. And so if you took that away from, diners, they would be upset. Why aren't you on these things? And people are willing to pay extra for them. But the issue is also there's a couple of different clauses that people maybe who haven't been on the operations side don't understand. Different prices. You are legally not allowed to charge more on a delivery app than you would charge in person if that same item is being.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's kind of crazy.
And I think that maybe that's just for certain. Yeah, maybe it's just for certain apps. But when you think about being able to offset that crazy delivery fee, you really can't. So that's one thing. The second thing is the restaurant pretty much eats all of the costs if anything goes wrong. So let's just say Postmates delivery driver picks up, your pasta and decides, they have to get gas maybe on the way and they have another meal to drop off somewhere else. The food that you are getting now is, it's been sitting for 45 minutes to an hour. Maybe it's cold and it arrives way obviously in a different shape than the restaurant had sent it out to you. Which most people have to understand when they're ordering takeout. It's not going to be the freshest or anything like that. But the restaurant has very little control over how that food is kept and what happens to it after it leaves their doors. However, if a complaint is launched on Postmates or Uber Eats or whatever it is, hey, it took way too long for my food to get here, or the quality wasn't good, or whatever it was, the restaurant eats that cost. So maybe Postmates will refund you and you're like, oh, great, like Postmates is, giving me $20 back. It's not Postmates, it's the restaurant.
I didn't know that.
Which is crazy. Because most of the times people who complain have no idea and they think, okay, well, it's Postmates, they can afford this. No, it's the restaurant. It's the restaurant who, maybe they sent the food out perfectly and it was actually completely not their fault that it arrived cold or, whatever in the best quality, and it was the driver. So those two things, I think as someone who orders takeout now, I'm incredibly empathetic. And I'm never the one to complain or launch a complaint on one of those. But it's really frustrating, right? When you order food and it says it's going to arrive in 45 minutes and an hour and a half later, you're like, I'm starving,
Totally. Yeah.
So is delivery viable? Is it something that I think that so many restaurants, because they're in the business of serving people and giving people the meal that they want in hospitality, they want to be on delivery apps because they want to get their food to people and feed people. There is no way, I think, that restaurants as they are today can survive solely on delivery. And so this, brings up the ghost kitchen concept and all of that. And I think that, restaurants that don't have a brick and mortar and have, low overhead and those types of things can definitely find a way to be profitable without, through a ghost kitchen type operation and through delivery platforms. But especially the mom and pop restaurants who are trying to transition over to these things, Postmates will charge you, or Uber Eats, or, any of them will really charge you close to 30% per order.
That's so much.
Which is crazy. And the only way you're able to negotiate those fees is if you have multiple locations. And so the companies who are like, Shake Shack or whatever, the larger companies who don't necessarily even need the better rates are the ones who end up getting them, economies of scale and all of that. So it makes sense, but it also, there needs to be a solution for the smaller businesses, right? Like, how are you going to keep the little guys from going out of business? And right now there's no plan to do that. And I think the only way to do that is through some type of government intervention, a bailout plan, something like that. Or, offering a solution to, maybe mandating that the delivery apps don't charge fees for companies of this size, or, and give it a tax break, or, I'm sure there's tons of creative solutions. That's obviously not my expertise, but I think that, like Maria said, I think that, 60% of restaurants and a lot of your favorite restaurants are going to close.
Absolutely. I also wanted to invite anyone who has questions. I see there are a couple here to ask them in the chat. And we have one here, which is actually from my mom. In simple terms, what is the profit difference between dine-in, takeout, and delivery?
That's a great question. Well, so the profit difference. So when you think about a successful restaurant, obviously this varies from concept to concept to concept. You could have a takeout taqueria that's essentially just delivery only, and well, obviously that's not dine-in. When you think about a restaurant like the Rose, or one that I've operated, a normal sort of sit-down restaurant, you want your food cost, a really good food cost is around 25%. I would say you want your food cost somewhere in the realm, if you can get it as low as 18 or 20%, to 35% is probably standard. And you definitely want to stay within that. Because then you think about labor. Oh,
I think it's reconnecting here.
Can you hear me? Uh-oh, it seems like I might have.
You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, where did I cut out?
What do you think about labor?
Yeah, so labor. You know, when you think about the minimum wage going up, which it absolutely should, and people should be compensated for their work. But like I said, I think a successful restaurant, you know, the margins are operating, their profit margin is 15%. Probably. That's like a good profit margin, right? Like if you're crushing it, if you're Felix, if you're the Rose, and these are all kind of like big name LA restaurants, you're making 15 to maybe 20%, somewhere in that realm. You're not making 50%. You're not making 80%. And so, you know, again, takeout, you're breaking even if your fee is 15% or 20%, right? It obviously depends on what items you're offering, but you can't charge on the delivery platforms. You can't offset that cost. And so most people do not make money on delivery platforms. They just do it to essentially break even, right? And if you can break even on a delivery, if you're brick and mortar and you're on delivery breaking even, it's helping you pay for the cost of rent and things like that, and bringing in extra revenue, which is obviously useful. But that alone cannot sustain a business.
Totally. And I wanted to ask, what sort of places do you think will be able to come out on the other side of this versus the places that might not be able to?
Yeah, I mean, I think places whose landlords are willing to negotiate will have a much easier time coming out of this, especially if the government doesn't intervene. Oh, someone is saying it's not that much. It is profitable. It just depends. It totally depends. I'm sure there's restaurants that do it and do it well. I would say that if they do it well, their margins are not high. I don't. It's a sustainable model if you have a brick and mortar. If it's ghost kitchen, then it's a different story. But I think if you have a brick and mortar that's transitioning to delivery and takeout, it's hard to be profitable.
Totally. Do you think like more chain type places will survive? I had just read that, and I mean, it unfortunately makes sense. What do you think?
I think if we're transitioning to a delivery kind of only world, then yeah, those are the places with the better rates. I think that independently run restaurants, though they've band together and all of that, if like I know plenty of people in the LA area, and again, I'm just speaking from the people I know in my experience, whose landlords aren't willing to negotiate. I know other ones who have decided, hey, you know what? I'm in this with you. Let's do a percentage-based rent, and are coming up with creative solutions to align their interests, because they obviously both want to stay in business and both need to make a profit somehow. But I do think that generally speaking, if there's you know, any place with low overhead will make it. Any place, you know, who has a huge rent to pay and you know, an enormous facility to upkeep is not going to make it.
Yeah, that's really tough. It's crazy how that is kind of the make or break. We have a comment here. Brett Walker says he's seen some long running restaurants in Silver Lake shut down because developers pushed them out. That is terrible. It makes sense. Okay.
mean, landlords, frankly, it's something people don't really think about, but real estate is such a commercial real estate is sort of a huge part of the restaurant industry. And if you own your restaurant, if you're the landlord of your restaurant, you're in a great position. I think,
Exactly. Right.
It really just depends on like the terms of your lease. And, if you have a 10-year lease and your landlord's saying, nope, we're not going to give you any breaks on rent, and they're allowed to do that somehow, then you're kind of screwed if you're not bringing in any revenue.
Totally. That is pretty crazy. I was curious also if you think, and I'm not sure if this is something I think and it's true, or I'm curious what you'll think. Do you think that this virus and the conditions of the pandemic are accelerating like the future of the restaurant industry in terms of, places can't always survive on really thin margins, and more corporate establishments are better able to?
Yes and no. So I think that, as terrible as COVID is, obviously wish it never happened or isn't happening and all of that. But the silver lining, right? You always have to look at the silver lining, is that it is bringing to light a lot of the issues that exist in hospitality. And there are many issues that exist. And I think that, yes, I think that, for instance, there were tons of technologies that even, 2 years ago, for instance, Check Please, the company I'm working for right now, started as a way to basically pay for your check through scanning a QR. But 2 years ago, no one was. And it's hard to change consumer behavior, right? And because people are becoming more open-minded and, willing to try new technologies just because it's the only way you can do it now, right? And it's for your safety, are much more receptive to changing their behaviors, which, before, the whole point of hospitality, it's like, well, you want to go be served, you want to have the human interaction, you want all of this stuff. But ultimately right now, we're kind of like, how can we cut labor? And technology can help us cut labor that will improve margins. And again, then some jobs are taken off the market. And so it's constantly this kind of balancing act of finding ways to, employ people and keep it, keep that special human touch and that kind of, Dreamweaver attitude that Will Guidara talks about and a lot of Madison Park, and what makes certain restaurants so magical is the hospitality you get. And then making sure that, that you also, can sustain your business with labor and the tools to help you do that.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you or touch upon this idea about people leaving the industry or not, and also how people being laid off in mass numbers sort of affects the culture of a restaurant, which, as we both know from working in restaurants, you become very close with the people you work with. You're working with them literally in close quarters, and there are a lot of stressful situations. It is often fun, but I feel like you really do bond with people in a specific, particular way when you work in a restaurant, and this is a tough situation for affecting that culture too, I think.
Yeah, I think so much of what brings people together in restaurants is this idea of service, that, you're all there to give someone a great experience. And, a lot of times you get to, excuse my language, but shoot the shit, right? You have a terrible customer or a guest who's come in and they're rude to you for no reason. And you know what? It's your job to just take it and give them a good time. And, sometimes it's not something you did. Sometimes it is something you did. But, you and your coworkers are kind of in the trenches together in a way. I think that's what brings everyone so close. And so absolutely, are people trying to leave the industry? Are they thinking about it? Yes. Personally, I am. There's things that I've had to think about. I think that there's work-life balance for a ton of people has been something to consider recently. I think whereas up until this point, many chefs, and think about the holidays, right? Like, this is the busiest time of year for many restaurants, especially special occasion restaurants and the fancier restaurants. And and the idea that, even though you're forced to shut, but like, hey, now you get to spend time with your family. That's never been something that restaurant owners, operators, and people have really had a chance to do recently. I personally, I haven't spent Thanksgiving with my family in quite some time. Because the expectation is that you work on holidays. And busy time. And I think, so yeah, it's terrible, but it's also, I think people in the industry are realizing, hey, this, you know, as much as this sucks, like, I don't want to give this up again. Like, I actually realize how important it is to spend time with my family and to have these moments with, you know, I'm so focused on giving people the amazing holiday they want. How about my family's holiday? You know?
Yeah. And we have a comment here. People in the restaurant industry have issues with alcohol a lot. That definitely is true. And I think sort of the stress of having a funky schedule and like really hard work must be associated with that, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, in addition to alcoholism, I mean, you think about the hours that you work, and that's more conducive to, I would say less conducive to a healthy lifestyle. But, you know, yes, someone said their knee's been injured. I actually have an ulnar nerve issue just from repetitive motion in the kitchen. It's a manual labor job. Yeah, and so you not only get mentally tired, but physically tired. You know, you're on your feet all day, like you said. You know, running around and lifting heavy things, cooking in the heat of a kitchen, not wearing a mask. You know, it's all of these things that compound each other and add to a lot of stress, both on the body and, you know, mentally for people. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that people are considering leaving the industry because there hasn't been that balance, especially when you're operating on 15% margins. How can you know, give all the employees the pay time off that you want to? I mean, I think that there are some restaurant owners and operators who are profitable and who are able to do that. But, you know, but ultimately it's a choice, right? Like, you're in hospitality because you love it, and you're sort of committing to working holidays and working hours most people have off. And I think that this work from home attitude or work from home thing that everyone's getting to experience is not something that restaurant operators and owners and workers are getting to experience, because you have to be at the restaurant. So there's not that flexibility. You can't work from home. You can't, you know, raise your kid while doing your job. You have to, you know, still put them in daycare, whatever it is. So I think it really is shedding light on a lot of these issues that hopefully get addressed. And hopefully, I think technology is definitely going to be a thing that gets, you know, that people are more open to and can help restaurants operate more efficiently.
Absolutely. I've been curious about how worker-owned places are doing during these times. There are a bunch of them in Berkeley, actually, like Cheese Board, which I know you like. But I've been curious if there will be more worker-owned places. How it will happen after this? I don't know. Just something I've been curious about. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's actually created a way for a lot of people to venture out on their own. For instance, you know, I've had people reach out to me for catering gigs, or, you know, a friend of mine has started her own taco business. It's delicious, breakfast tacos in LA, and, you know, it's called Mad Sun Tacos for anyone who wants to check it out. But it's I think people are, you know, they're getting more creative, right? It's what can I do? What's my brand? What do I like doing? And where's the gap? And let me just do this one thing that I can do well. You know, whether it's now volunteering for, you know, the frontline heroes and some organizations that are helping arrange meals for the people who are working in hospitals. But I think it's actually given away, lending itself to more creativity. You know, I think that, like, in any economic downturn, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. And I think that certain people are definitely being opportunistic about it and thinking about, hey, well, like, this is a great opportunity, you know, while I am furloughed, like, let me think about, you know, how about I start my own business I've been thinking about. And you know, I hope that continues. I think that's really important for people to kind of get creative with that.
Totally. Maya, we have a question here. Do you think ghost kitchens will become more of the norm?
Absolutely. So,
what is a ghost kitchen? Just so we can define that.
Yeah, a ghost kitchen is essentially it is a commercial kitchen that is not open to the public, in the sense that, let's just say you go on Postmates and there's this bagel shop. The bagel shop might not exist for you to go into a brick and mortar. In other words, you can only order the bagels through Postmates. And they basically rent out a commercial kitchen space, and they create a menu and a brand. And, you know, you or I could start a ghost kitchen concept, you know, Maya and Caroline's diner. rent the space with way lower overhead. You don't have to buy chairs and worry about resi and reservations and staffing it. You're really just staffing the people who are cooking the food. Create a brand menu and send it out to the public. And so it's really a to-go only concept. And so, as far as ghost kitchens go, tons and tons have been popping up. I think that the ghost kitchen industry grew 400% at the beginning of COVID or something like that.
That's so much.
So much. Because you have these people who want to be able to give their food to their guests, and if they can't open their restaurant, this is a great alternative. Right. And people are becoming much more okay with takeout and all of that. And so, let's see, it says they relax laws from cooking from home and food.
Oh, interesting. I will say one thought I did have about ghost kitchens is I read an article in Berkeley Side about someone who was basically, as you were saying, using this as a time to start a business. So I forget what type of food it was. I forget what it was, but basically it was a type of food that wasn't available around the Bay Area, basically. And they were like, okay, this is an opportunity to start a business. There's low overhead. And I guess it's pretty popular. A lot of people are ordering it on the app. So I'm curious, I wonder if they'll ever turn into a brick and mortar. That's unconventional way to start, but it's kind of cool that people who do just say, hey, I want people to try this food, see if they like it. That's
and it's a great way to test your concept, right? Like before you start your own restaurant, for instance, like so much of the advice that I've gotten is, you need proof of concept. And how do you get proof of concept? You need to be able to feed people the food. And so this is a great way to do that.
Totally. Now,
I think ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens, all of those things are definitely in the future.
Definitely. Sorry, you just cut out at the end there, but I can still hear you. So yeah, the question about relaxed laws cooking from home. That's interesting. I don't know. Do you know at all about that?
I don't really know anything about that personally. It says it's not legal to cook prep food for sale from home. I don't necessarily think that they should relax those laws. I mean,
I think they are relaxed in the Bay Area, actually. I think, I want to say, I don't know how recently, but they did relax the laws about it so that people I think you can sell stuff at like farmers markets and stuff if you make it at your house, like baked goods, things like that.
Sure. No, I think that's great. I think that a lot of times you have to pay for the expensive certifications, which prevents a lot of people from being able to do that. So I think that as long as you meet certain standards, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to cook from home or things like that. I do think it's a little bit trickier in COVID, especially when you're like, I don't know how this person is living and what their exposure is like. COVID doesn't really live on food though. And I think studies have shown that it isn't transmissible or as transmissible through food. So, I don't really see an issue with that other than, I think there are expensive certifications and barriers to entry, to be at these markets and things like that. And so if you can just reach certain criteria, I don't see why that would be an issue.
Yeah. I think, those are pretty much all of my questions, Maya. I was wondering, is there anything else you wanted to touch upon or you think people should know about the restaurant industry, where it is and how it might change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, this is going to be, like I said, it's a terrible thing that has happened, but I do think that there is this silver lining of awareness and exposure, to these kind of the unfortunate truth of the industry is, people are underpaid, people are undocumented, there isn't accessible healthcare, there's all of these, there's so many of these things, there's glamorized overworking, there's, all of this, all of the stuff that's being brought to light, and hopefully because of that, awareness creates change, and I think that it will lead to changes in both employers' attitudes and people who go out to eat, and just understanding what it takes to run a restaurant, and empathy, as well as people now being more open to change, to technology, and to that being incorporated into hospitality as a way to help owners and operators. And I do think it is generally going to be a good thing. I think that people are, getting creative with ways to operate a business. and technology helps a lot with that. So I really do think that's going to be positive in the long run, although it sucks so much right now for everyone in the industry for so many reasons. But, you know, hopefully some good can come out of it.
Thank you, Maya. Appreciate all of your insights and expertise, as always. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll be back next week with another show. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Caroline_Hart_. Maya, if people want to connect with you, you don't have Twitter, do you?
I don't have Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, my first and last name. Happy to connect with anyone. I'm in the LA area. I've been in hospitality since I was 15. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Here to just chat and shoot the shit. Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Much appreciated, and see you next week. Bye, Maya.
Bye-bye.